Our first speaker is Amit Naik, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Cloudflare. Amit is an industry expert with more than 20 years of experience in cybersecurity and network transformation. Before Cloudflare, Amit worked at technology providers such as Cisco, Juniper, and Netscope, and he advised several large global organizations on best practices in cybersecurity and network transformation. Amit will talk about a very interesting topic for today. It's the death of the network hardware appliances and the evolution of cloud-native security.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for having me today, and thanks for everyone for joining. I want to kick this session off by talking about the death of network hardware appliances, right? The one trend that we've seen across the industry over the last decade or so is it's no longer fashionable or practical or efficient or cost-effective to use custom hardware appliances, build your own data centers, and we've seen a shift to the cloud in areas such as compute, such as storage, and to the point where it's these days, unless you have strong compliance requirements or use cases, it's almost the default option is start in the cloud, right? And we've seen that shift happen on compute and storage quite very rapidly. And where we are right now is we're starting to see that shift happen with networking and with network security as well. So I want to talk about that a little bit and set the stage up for the panel discussion we're about to have. And again, as you go through this, feel free to type any questions in chat. Brian's keeping an eye on it. We're happy to take them during this session and or during the panel discussion as well. So I talked about digital transformation, right? So it's a very loaded word and it's a little bit overused, but the gist of it is that a lot of the functions we're used to doing in everyday life and in business, they're going digital, right? And this got a huge boost in March of 2020 when we were all forced to stay at home and figure things out and anything that could be digitized, we tried to digitize as much as possible. And this is sort of, if we were to capture sort of the 5 elements of this that are sort of going out there, right? There's a change in expectations around digital experience. So users are no longer comfortable or willing to tolerate laggy applications or old applications with old UIs, right? They're expecting these instant experiences, responsive apps, everything sort of available everywhere on every device, right? Compute, we know, has shifted from a more centralized model to a distributed model, right? Using the public cloud. We're seeing kind of strong trends from the Web 2.0 era of data collection towards more and more data privacy, more governance, more control. Sure, we're reminded of that every time we click on a cookie confirmation on a website. And we're moving away from this notion of perimeter security to a notion of zero trust security, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about this. And then also on the network side, we're moving away from sort of rigid proprietary circuit-based networks and sort of hardwired MPLS networks to more agile, flexible network as a service model, right? Are we fully there yet? Not really, right? So some of these trends are further along than others, but we're here to talk more about how do we get network and security over to the right side of this picture, right? And it's not easy, but we'll chart a course to get there. Right? The other big trend out there is this thing called the internet. So many of us grew up in an era where you had a very distinct corporate enterprise network that connected your data centers, your offices, your users, right? And this was very, very distinct, very separate, separated from the internet with strong perimeter security. Now we're kind of living in a world where we're all working on the internet. If you're using a SaaS application like Office 365 or Salesforce or Slack, you're using it essentially over the internet. If you're using, if you have remote workers, right, they're coming in over the internet. All of us working at home, we've been working at home for the past 2 years. We're connecting over the internet. And an enterprise network, it comes with some requirements in mind, right? So it needs to be everywhere, it needs to be secure, It needs to be fast, reliable, intelligent, software defined. These are the attributes we look for in a corporate network. And the internet's not really all of these things, right? It does a good job of being everywhere. Is it secure? Definitely not, right? Along with legitimate users, the internet also connects you to a lot of malicious traffic, malicious bots out there, right? So it's not necessarily secure. Is it fast and reliable? On a good day, yes, right? Like we've all been doing multiple Zoom calls from home, and for the most part, the internet holds up. But if you're trying to run something mission critical, right, that business depends on, that lives depend on, can you count on the internet? Right, those are some of the questions. And then can you really steer traffic around the internet? Is it intelligent? Can you software control the attributes? These are some of the areas that are a little bit challenging with the internet. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about kind of the evolution from an appliance-based world to where we're trying to go, which is more of a cloud-native world, right? But to have that discussion, I want to sort of talk about a couple of fundamental shifts that we're seeing out there on the on networks and network security, and we'll drill down into each of these, right? So I talked about, 15 years ago, things were kind of, you had a distinct enterprise network that was separated from the internet with perimeter firewalls, right? And we call this the castle and moat model. You had the private side, you have the public side, and the two shall never meet or talk except through firewall controls, right? And this worked really well when all your applications were inside and they were in your data centers, and that worked out great. And you had technologies that evolved in this era, like VPNs, like next-gen firewalls. You had MPLS networks to provide the connectivity, right? And then you had things like secure web gateway to control users' access to the internet. And these technologies were great for this model, right? But then we started seeing a shift. The first fundamental shift happened about a decade ago, right, where we started seeing a shift of applications from data centers to public cloud and SaaS. That was a major shift that had impact on networks. And then we saw organizations go more and more global, right? We saw supply chains go more and more global. And that came with some additional requirements. And that put us in what I would call sort of the virtualization and SD-WAN era, right? SD-WAN came along to give us more programmability, more flexibility with our WAN networks. And that worked really well for a while, right? It solved some problems. It allowed you to do internet breakouts, allowed you to lower your costs by using commodity internet. And then in this model, also we saw this move where all these technologies that you had on the left side in physical appliances, all those appliances got virtualized, and then you could run them in a hypervisor, or you could run them in the public cloud and then consume services that way, right? Right now, we're seeing a second shift that's happening out there, which is this fundamentally, we're starting to rely more and more on the internet is the corporate network, right? And this is sort of creating some additional changes in the way we look at network security, because you no longer have a clean defined perimeter. And the problem with this model is, in this model, we were used to kind of doing best of breed, right? So you needed a secure web gateway, you went out on the market, you found the best vendor out there, stuck that appliance in that slot, and you're good. Your service chaining was just connecting those appliances together, and you were fine. In the virtualized and the cloud native world, that becomes a little bit more challenging, because your service chaining might involve your traffic taking paths to multiple providers, networks, and public cloud services, and that's not efficient, and that's not ideal, right? And that's kind of what's bringing us to the third generation, if we will. You may have heard of the term SASE, right? Secure Access Service Edge, which is trying to bring together security and networks. And the end goal of here really is to make your network more agile, and then make your security more granular, make it more zero trust, more identity and device centric rather than network centric. So what does this really look like in more practical terms, right? So we all recognize this picture in some shape or form, right? This is the classic enterprise network where you had a couple of data center locations. That's where all your apps lived. You had branch offices and stores, if you will, or retail locations. You had your headquarters, and then you had a performant, secure MPLS network connecting all of this together. And then you had the internet, right? So the internet was typically maybe a couple breakouts, one from each of these data center locations. And if any of these users from any of these locations wanted to go to the internet, they had to go get backhaul to the data center and out to the internet. And then remote users, conversely, they would come back over the internet into one of these data center locations where you'd have a VPN concentrator, and then they would have free access to this entire network, right? And to enable this, you needed a whole stack of technologies, right? You needed routing, you needed switching, you needed WAN optimization, right? You needed a secure web gateway, you needed a VPN concentrator. You may need a next-gen firewall. You may need a DDoS protection appliance. You may need some load balancers and so on, right? So this is a stack of appliances that a lot of us grew up with and lived with for the longest time. The good thing about this architecture is, it gives you good centralized policy control. So your perimeter firewalls at these 2 points, they can really restrict where you can go and what can come in. It's a familiar architecture. However, on the con side, it's kind of an expensive model if you're using MPLS to connect all of your sites, and it's a relatively rigid model, right? And this was nowhere more obvious than in the last couple of years when organizations had to reconfigure their offices, right? Reprovision their offices. Many organizations closed down offices and went remote first. Many organizations had to close down stores and retail locations or relocate them, right? But if they had a 3-year MPLS contract, they were still stuck paying for the service, which they no longer needed. That was a huge con, right? It's impeding business agility. And especially now, as we're living in a hybrid work future, we don't know when we're going to go back to offices, 100% office work, right? We're going to exist in some hybrid model for quite some time in the foreseeable future. And you, as an infrastructure admin, as a network owner, as a network security owner, you want flexibility and you want choice, and you don't want to be locked into anything rigid, right? The other big problem in this model is for customers and users on these applications, as long as they were using apps in the data center, things were fine. But if they started to use SaaS-based applications, which are on the internet, that's where they would start seeing performance problems, right? Many of us, when we started rolling out Office 365, when we did the migration from Exchange to O365, we saw some of these problems. And the recommendation from folks like Microsoft is, just do internet breakouts at the branches, right? We are optimized to deliver over the internet across the whole world. So we want to be as close to your users as possible. So don't backhaul where you can, right? So those are the kinds of recommendations we were getting from the SaaS world. So let's fast forward to today, right? What things look like. So we have the internet. We have a lot of SaaS on the internet, which has become business critical. We have the public cloud services that are out there where we run apps. We still do have some legacy data centers, so they haven't fully gone away, right? We have remote users, and then we still have our locations. And a few of the changes we've been able to make between 10 years ago and now is do things like leverage software-defined WANs. The software-defined WANs do a really good job of making our networks a little bit more programmable, a little bit more intelligent, a little bit more application aware. And they also allow us to do things like internet breakouts, so your Office 365 traffic might exit out to the internet right at the branch rather than backhauling, right? Assuming your security policies allow that. And this has some advantages. It improves business agility, right? It allows you to reconfigure your WAN, allows you to, if you're just using commodity internet, it's typically not a long-term contract. You could shut down sites, add sites without sort of a long impact. But this is you're sort of operating in the hybrid mode, so you still have a little bit of the old, you have a little bit of the new. And the one thing that SD-WAN doesn't solve for right out of the gate is security, right? So if you look at security, if you look at things like secure web gateways for users to go out to the internet, we still continue to see large enterprise networks where they will backhaul all user traffic from all over the world to a data center location in North America. and that's where they'll get their internet exit, right? And that continues to happen, and that's not a good situation if you're very, very SaaS dependent. That means a poor user experience for all your employees, lower productivity, and latency penalties for the network, right? So we have the situation where security requirements are constraining the way we build networks. So what's the answer? What does the future look like, right? So the future is where we're, we debate this point quite a bit, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in the panel discussion. But is the internet the corporate network, right? Is this the future of the corporate network? And is that just a de facto truth now, right? And if that is the case, then how do we bring together networks, all of these security services we talked about, right? Secure web gateway, zero trust network access, CASB. How do we bring it together into a common platform? And that's really the vision outlined by SASE. And I say vision for SASE because SASE is a work in progress still, right? And it has a number of advantages. It gives you business agility. It improves your security posture, reduce TCO by consolidating all these services, and then allows the best performance and user experience for your users, right? And of course, the challenges are SASE is evolving, and if you kind of just go best in breed with all of these services, then you're going to end up with service chaining problem in the cloud. And then if you consolidate all these services in a common platform, which is where you want to be, you may find that you don't have 100% of what you're looking for right out of the gate on day one, right? So that's kind of where we are with SASE and in general. And this is a common conversation I have with a lot of customers is like, SASE sounds really big and complex and intimidating, right? I don't want to rip and replace everything I have. And you really don't have to do a full rip and replace. You can break it out into phases. There's lots of components to this that you can start on now without having to kind of bite off more than you can chew, right? So we've kind of grouped this, laid out a roadmap here, and we've grouped it into a journey. So there's some sort of easy things we can do, like retiring traditional VPNs for zero trust network access, right? VPNs are cumbersome. Nobody likes them. That's an easy win for the organization. You can replace that with some cloud native access service. Right? Internet breakouts from the branches. So this is another key use case that all the SaaS applications demand, right? And there are some controls that will help you do that, like cloud-based secure web gateway, CASBs, ZTNA, remote browser isolation, right? So there are capabilities that help you maintain your security even while you're doing breakouts in the branches. And then you have things like data controls, right? DLP, to make sure that that breakout doesn't become a point of data leakage. And then last but not the least is kind of transforming your network architecture and eliminating the legacy private circuits, moving away from expensive MPLS to more agile network as a service as these contracts come up, and then integrating network security right into that, right? So if you're using a security-enabled network, then you have the ability to turn on network security controls and policies right there in the cloud without having to worry about putting appliances on premises. And I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about kind of how Cloudflare goes about addressing this, right? So we have a platform called Cloudflare One, which is sort of a consolidation of a lot of network services and all of the security services, everything delivered as a service over a global unified network. So you get connectivity, security, and traffic acceleration all on one platform. How do we do this? So a little bit of history on Cloudflare. So many of you might know about us, have heard about us. So about 11 years ago when we started with a simple mission, right? We wanted to help make a better internet. We took a bet that the internet is going to be more and more important in our lives in the future. And what are some of the problems that needed to be solved over there? Problems like performance, problems like security. And that's really what drove the creation of all Cloudflare services. And this puts us in a really great position because now business is happening on the internet, hybrid work is happening on the internet. And to help enable this, over the last 11 years, we've built out a massive global network footprint. So each of these dots here is a city where Cloudflare has presence. So it's over 250 cities at this point. So quite a significant global span. And our motivation behind this is really to build out a network that is close to the population centers of the world, close to where the users are, close to what we also call them eyeballs, right? Close to where the eyeballs are. And that really allows us to keep round trip times really low and deliver services like security, like DDoS mitigation, closest to the user, closest to the origin, right? Rather than ship it somewhere else to a specialized data center. It's also one of the most connected networks in the world, right? With direct connections to over 10,000 different major ISPs, enterprises, public clouds, and it has over 100 terabytes per second of edge capacity. And from a security perspective, if there is anything bad going on the internet, chances are very good we see it. The typical day, we stop about 76 billion cyber threats across all of our customers and our own infrastructure. Yeah, right. And this is really the network platform on which Cloudflare One is built. So this is just a really simplified view of Cloudflare One. So think of it as connecting all your offices, your users, your data centers, your in-office users, your remote users, and connecting them to the places they need to get to, like internet-based apps, SaaS applications, your own private cloud applications. Not only offering the security service, but offering the network service as well to enable this connectivity. And the advantage of this approach is, things like single pass inspection, right? So in one shot, when inspecting traffic, we can look at CASB controls, we can apply zero trust access policies, we can potentially trigger browser isolation, and then you can manage all of this in a single pane of glass as well. And the consolidation really helps you reduce spend on private network links and appliances. So with that being said, I am going to pause here. If you have any questions on what we discussed, feel free to reach out to me via email, amit@cloudflare.com. But I'm going to pause here and looking forward to the panel discussion.